Hello, this is Tim Law with Planet Forward Coaching, always encouraging self-reliance and mental toughness. If you develop a marketable skill, chase that skill with a great work ethic, always go the extra mile, develop people and communication skills. You'll be amazed at what you can accomplish in this country. A big thank you to over 600 people that have subscribed to this channel, Planet Forward Coaching. If you haven't already, please do so. I'd super appreciate it. I got a really neat guy that, we just kind of met last week at the EIWA wrestling tournament down at the University of Pennsylvania. Sean O'Malley, and he's got a great story to tell. He wrestled for Drexel University. And so, Sean, go ahead. Great to see you. We'll do some Q&A here.
All right, sounds good. Yeah, like Tim said, I'm Sean O'Malley. I wrestled at Drexel for 6 years, got that extra COVID year, which was super nice. I got my undergraduate in pre-law and finance at Drexel, and currently am in the graduate program for my master's of entrepreneurship and innovation at Drexel right now. And through this nice little fun journey over the past 6 years, I ended up in a situation right now where I'm actually starting up two businesses, a character development and motivational coaching company, as well as a nonprofit organization specifically designated towards sport-specific training and mental performance outlets for inner city at-risk kids, specifically children in broken family homes, because that's a very, very dense statistic across our country. And it's getting bigger and bigger and crazier with some of the impacts a single parent household could leave on a child, especially with him or her discovering their own identity, building a character, and inevitably building a bright future for themselves. So
yeah, certainly. Go ahead. It sounds fantastic.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I think when you and I talked last week, because we had met, as I said, last weekend at the wrestling tournament, we're down in the downstairs wrestling room chatting a little bit. And you said you kind of were influenced as far as your father was concerned, as far as business and entrepreneurship. Tell us a little bit, for a minute or so about your dad, what he's done, and then, how that's impacted you.
All right. So a little bit of about a little quippy backstory. So me and my dad and my brother's actually wrestling on nationals this week coming up. We got the circulating jokes. When we hit our pinnacles, you ever see the movie The Waterboy?
I parts of it. I've not seen the whole.
Parts of it?
Yeah, I've seen part of it. Yes.
All right. So when we hit our pinnacle of whatever our achievement is, whether it's Mickey this year going out and All-Americaning, or whether it's me being able to leave a massive impact on my community, or achieving any milestone with what I'm developing after college, any interview we have, we got to say, "I love my daddy." Like in Waterboy, like right when he wins the Bourbon Bowl, he comes off the sideline, he like hugs his mama. "I love my mama." He got it on the big old bulletin board. Yeah, so that's our like inner joke.
Good. Super.
Joke. Yeah. So my dad has instilled a huge impact in me my entire life. He is in lack of a better terms, a put his head down and do the work kind of guy. And he's a dude who does it his own way and is the most adaptable person I've ever met in my life. He has a solid opinion, but if his opinion isn't right, he is more than willing to adapt and build his system or his thought processes or his initiative to any obstacle at hand and make sure whatever task is at hand is most efficiently and properly done. His business, he deals with FF&E and fit outs, which is furniture, fixtures, and equipment. And pretty much just imagine like this room behind me was just blank slate walls. There was nothing in it, no doors, no pictures hung on the wall, no furniture, no nothing. He'll walk into a hotel room and fill that puppy up, make it beautiful. And ever since me and Mickey were kids, me and my brother were kids, my dad would take us on these projects and we loved going to them because we would see something from square one. It wasn't always from the ground up. Some of them were from the ground up that he worked with, but we would see things that were just completely blank. It was a blank canvas. It was just infrastructure. And my dad would come in with his crew and make it into these beautiful finalized products, like these beautiful finalized products. And it's like a full 180 transition. You're like, this was nothing like months ago. And now it's just these incredibly filled out, beautiful rooms. And throughout my experience with that, I was always like captivated by like my dad's ability to create something and leave his impact on his own niche or his own passion, which was FF&E and fit outs. It's a little bit of a niche in the property development industry, but it's awesome. It's not something many people talk about. And through there, anytime we would drive down like Route 17 or Route 23 or any of those back up in North Jersey, because that's where I'm from, I'd be sitting in the front seat, or my brother would be sitting in the back seat, and he would drive by and he'd be like pointing at buildings. He'd be like, I built that. I did this for that. I did the bar top in that restaurant. I built that restaurant from the square up. I did that casino. And every single time me and Mickey were like, no way, that's super cool. We're like getting super duper excited about that. But when I was young, I was always curious on why my dad would always point out like, hey, you're building these buildings. And my thought process was like, if he's building them, why doesn't he own them? Like when I was like a little kid. And like I obviously as time went through, I kind of grasped onto the idea of why he doesn't own them. But yeah, that was just something super fascinating to me that really intrigued my own entrepreneurial outlet, because I was able to see something that was a blank canvas and be built into something beautiful based off something my dad dedicated his life to, or has been dedicating his life to. And his own personal pursuits to building his own venture has just been has just had such an impact on me, and is just like the greatest thing personally. Like I have my own odd interests, but it's the greatest thing I could ever ask for. Like I'm more than grateful to have that. Like my dad be not only my father, but my mentor throughout my experience and my own entrepreneurial ventures, because he's a good dude.
Sure, sure.
And he'll cut me straight on any avenue, which is awesome.
That's what dads are supposed to do, Sean, for sure.
Yeah.
Great mentorship by him, as well as a great example. Now, I was really intrigued when you and I talked. Love to hear the story, if you could, for our listeners, regarding the Drexel wrestling program and the impact there, because that was just phenomenal. I really love what you did as far as I'm going to call it the culture of your team, as far as you helped it make pretty much make a 180 or so. So go ahead, tell us that story, please.
Definitely. But I'm going to take it a step further back.
Sure.
When I was getting recruited in high school, I was I would say a big fish in a small pond. We were in a group 1 school up in Newark, Jersey. There was like 300 kids in our school, very tiny school, but I was a top performing athlete in my area. So we got a lot of recognition, but we were in a very small pond. When I was looking for schools like Drexel, I wanted to find a way to leave a big impact on a small pond, because that's what I resonated with when going through my my youth development career with athletics. So I ended up running across Drexel. Phenomenal opportunity in all outlets, academics, professionally, resource and connection wise, fantastic program. But when I got here, I went through some things where I was like figuring out like how I could leave my impact. Like, what's the biggest thing I could leave? Like, what's the biggest impact I could leave on this program before I actually leave? And it was like I had a really rough 2 years kind of getting acclimated to the whole collegiate wrestling atmosphere, as well as managing my time on a quarter system with internships and having a job on the side and wrestling. There was a lot of helter skelter stuff going on. And I ended up like having this really good moment of reflection where I was like, the only way I could leave an impact is if I live by the impact I want to leave. So I really decided to do a lot of own personal thought and write a bunch of stuff down. My dad preaches, write everything down. Any thought you have, put it on paper. You're not writing it down. Like people think like if you write things down, you're just writing it down to forget it, but you're writing things down to reflect on them. I'm a big reflection and projection thinker. That's what my dad told me or taught me when I was growing up. So like around 2.5 years ago, or around 2 years into college, I just started writing everything down. I wasn't a big writer before then, but I started writing everything down. And while I was writing things down, I was coming up with all these incredible questions for myself. Like, what's my purpose in life? That's a super hard question. Or like, who am I? Who is Sean O'Malley? Who is the identity that I hold? Like, what's the identity that I hold? Or what's the character or the person that I want to be when I grow up? We get asked these questions when we're a young kid and we're like, oh, I want to be a fighter, a police officer, or anything like that. But we don't really know the character, or never really think of the character that is exuded through that specific end goal of becoming that profession. So I was doing like all these like really, I was getting really, really into some deep thought and looked into a lot of psychology books while writing everything down because I was coming up with these questions and I wasn't finding the answers to them on my own. So I started reading psychology books. So the probably the most pivotal figure in everything that I've written was about this guy. So I'm huge on Carl Jung or Jung. Everyone says it a little bit different.
Sure.
But Carl Jung, he's my favorite psychologist. But I also got introduced to that whole Jungian movement through this book, The King, the Magician, the Warrior, and the Lover by David Gillette and Robert Moore. Fantastic read. If you haven't read it, 10 out of 10 recommend. But what it was it broke down the archetypes or the archetypes of masculinity and how through through your life's experience, you're able to exude certain characteristic traits that lead you into an archetype. All right. So it's from your collective unconscious. That's your inherited conscious, you're at a conscious level or unconscious level, you would inherit the conscious responsibility of your ancestors. So it's like my dad's problems from my dad's experiences, I am all of a sudden inherited because he's also raising me through that. But
Sure.
I am a descendant of him. I'm a piece of my dad. So I started doing all this reading and all this research, and I ran across that book, The King, the Magician, the Warrior, and the Lover. Fantastic. And I read the thing like 3 or 4 times, and I was like, wow, this explains a lot about people. And from there, I branched off. Another Robert guy, Robert Moore was another dude that, or no, I mean, Robert Johnson was another guy. All his books are like under 150 pages. And I was like, I read one of his book. It was just called He. It was a pivot off the topic of the King, the Magician, and the Warrior, and the Lover, and it was on the archetypes of masculinity and the male psyche. And I started reading those books, and then I started reading things on the feminine psychology and things about like group psychology and social dynamics, and just branched off from there. And I started coming up with some very interesting frameworks and models and answers for myself.
Well, you were telling me too about how you applied this as far as your wrestling team was concerned.
Yes.
Which was yeah. So
yeah. So
let's try to pivot to that because that's
bad.
phenomenal.
Yeah.
Phenomenal
Yeah. So
story. So yeah, go ahead,
I'll
please.
cut the story short.
No,
Yeah. So I found all this
good.
information out.
Yeah.
Started doing all my own personal search, and then from that personal search, I was trying to find a way to instill an impact on my team. So in my 3rd year of college, I became a captain, and I wanted to leave that impact as soon as or as big as possible and take every initiative possible, every initiative I could do in order to leave my impact. And that was to create a personality on the team. Okay. That was my number one goal. We were a team that was like, had the potential to really peak through if we were all committed. But some people were like we talked about earlier, there was commitment or selfishness and laziness, or there was a lack of commitment in certain areas or certain excuses. And leading up until about 2 years ago, our team was in this really weird turmoil where there was all those, lack of better terms, excuses on the table. And as a leader and as of the team, and as someone who was super passionate about my loved ones, like I see these guys as my immediate family, felt like I needed to speak up. So one night I came up, one night I was at work. I work at a sushi restaurant. I used to work at a sushi restaurant. And at work, I was like thinking of all this stuff that was going on with our team, like the excuses, people coming in and complaining, people always like have a really poor outlook on what their own circumstance was in order for them to actually achieve something. And I wrote down 26 pages of material, and I was like, damn, this is a lot of stuff. Like, this is some stuff that our guys could definitely resonate with, but they're not going to resonate with 26 pages of material. So I'm like scratching my head. I'm like, oh man, what am I going to do? Like, I'm not going to be able to present this to anybody. Like, what am I just going to hand out a booklet and have everyone read it? No. So that same night, I spent about like 2.5 hours and condensed the whole thing into a 4-page structured speech or a format where I could kind of just like hand it out and present it to people. It was all on my notepad initially, but it escalated into a printout booklet. So the following day, on a whim, I called up my coach the night before, and I was like, Coach, I want to have a speech tomorrow morning. And he's like, what? And I'm like, on what? And I'm like, don't ask that question. I just want to talk to the guys tomorrow. So the following morning, I show up. I got my notebook in hand with all the pages ripped up and flapped up and sketches and drawings and the whole nine. And I stand in front of the crowd, stand in front of my teammates, stand in front of my family. And I spoke purely out of passion that day. And that was one of the proudest moments I've had as a team member, a part of Drexel, because I really, really cared about my team, and I really, really care about like the future that these kids hold, because
Mhm.
they're so goddamn talented. And
Mhm.
so many people are so goddamn talented. They just don't want to like, they got so many self-limiting beliefs, and um aren't able to actually grasp onto their true potential because they don't have the clarity to figure that out or the direction to figure that out.
Sure.
And I presented this speech to them, and I it was like 20 minutes. It was a little longer than coach liked, but after the speech, I was just wanted to get things off my chest. But after the
Mhm.
speech, I had multiple kids on the team come up to me and were like, Sean, like, I have, like, that was incredible. Like, thank you for that. And I was like, I was shell shocked by the responses because I was just saying this purely out of passion. But
Sure.
these guys were actually resonating with it. And it made me like very proud of me getting that off my chest, because I cared about these guys and I wanted to see them do better. And if me just having to speak up was what was going to resonate with them in order to pursue a certain outlet for success or for their own life's abundance, that's beautiful. That's exactly what
Mhm.
I wanted. And, or that was exactly what I intended for this. Um, and long story short, like these kids, like I ended up having two or three guys come up to me, and then those two or three guys came up to like 10 guys, and then those 10 guys turned to like 15. And all of a
Mhm.
sudden I was talking to like almost every single guy on the team, having individual meetings with them and just discussing what my thought process was and discussing some of the models and frameworks I've created for myself in order to build clarity in my own life, in
Mhm.
trying to achieve my own life's
So
purpose as
what
well.
impact, what did that do as far as your team was concerned going forward with the kind of turning some mindsets around?
Turning some mindsets around. Yeah, so prime example. I'll use my brother because I don't want to put anybody on the spotlight.
Sure.
So my brother, for example, exceptionally like he's my number one dude when it like he's my number one dude for anything. I love my brother to death. I'll die by the sword for that kid. But he uh he was going through his own little mental turmoil, and he needed a little bit of like, I don't know if it was a little push in the butt or just a little
Mhm.
bit of clarity in order for him to like solidify his focus and understand his task at hand. So my dad was pushing me like, hey, talk to Mickey, talk to Mickey, talk to Mickey. And I was like, of course I'll talk to my brother. Like, I live with my brother and I spend every second with him because he's my best friend. But I didn't want to like over pursue any outlets with him, just kind of like rubbing it in his face in any direction. So I was like kind of took like back end on it. And he had a little bit of a rough beginning of the season because he was facing a lot of injuries,
Mhm.
and a personality switch that I saw, and it may not have been on the mat, but outside of the mat, was I ran the first solidified model that I have that I'm actually copywriting right now. It's called the 5W1H model.
Mhm.
Um, and he I ran through the whole thing with him, and I ran through this model with around 8 or 9 other guys on the team, and his reaction was a lot different than what I expected it to be, even though
Mhm.
he's my brother. Which kind of gave me like a little bit like maybe it kicked me in the chest a little bit. I was like,
Sure.
damn,
Sure.
like like you are way more impressive than you carry yourself to be. It was um like just being able to be a guide for him in the sense where like I could build clarity for some of the really, really important focuses in his life that he's not really sure of the clarity. Um, I was able to build a little bit of a direction. I feel, and he has his own opinion on this, but we've talked about it.
Sure.
I felt like I was able to clarify a little bit of direction for like the things that were really, really important in his life. And it may be like, I'm not going to say exactly what it was, but let's say it was wrestling, or it was like finding a career after school, or it was a family member or a relationship or something like that. I was able to instill that perspective in him to help really clarify like what is important, what is your priority on your plate,
Mhm.
and because this is your priority or because this is your purpose, how are we going to get there? And then
Sure.
from figuring out how we're going to get there, I actually structured a plan for him to get there.
Mhm.
And from there, ever since we've had this conversation, and I try to do as the best I can, despite my busy schedule, to check in with everybody. He's made like some incredible leaps and boundaries on his own internal and external presentation.
Mhm.
He's a very reserved kid, very he like doesn't really show he's a goofy guy, and he doesn't really show his like doesn't express like everything that is really going on with him
Right.
because he's
Right.
very internal. Um, but his demeanor switched a little bit, which was absolutely beautiful. It touched me so much because um, he was being more real with himself, and that's something that's very important. People
Mhm.
aren't real with themselves, And when after this conversation, I kind of guided him through the process, and he was actually able to become real with the circumstances at play, like these injuries, like
Yeah.
whatever realm we talked about.
Well, and you were also telling me the impact it had not only on your team, but you said, I think, as far as the athletic department and everything. Give us a quick synopsis of that as well, Sean, as far as
Yeah.
how this was received.
Yeah. So it's not all the way up to like the ADs and stuff like that, but it's definitely
Right.
circulating around the athletic department.
Yeah.
So I've personally spoken with all the weight training coaches. Our weight training coaches are great dudes. And not only when it comes to figuring out lifting programs, but great people to just run ideas by. Exceptionally talented in all realms of their own life. Like they really grab life by the cojones, for lack of better terms. And yeah, these dudes, I ran all my initial model I pitched to this guy, Anthony McCluskey, who's one of the head lifting coaches at Drexel, and he is family. I don't count this dude as my coach. He's my family member at this point. He's such a great person. And I pitched this idea to him 2 years ago on this model I came up with called the Aura model. And I told him, I was like, I'm writing a book on this. After I presented this to him, I wrote it down on a note card for him and I handed it to him. And I'm like, I'm writing a book on this, getting this published. I'm doing something with this. I'm going to present this to people. And the one thing that irritated me was I didn't stick to my word for about a year. And this year was the year that I showed up into his office and had a solidified paper, and a solidified business plan and an initiative to how I was going to actually leave my impact on the family that I build. I don't call it a community because I feel like there's a lack of exclusivity in a community. Families are tighter knit, and everyone that is a part of what I'm creating, or I'm a part of what they're creating, it's a family to me. It's not a community. This is something that's with us. It's not something that's with everybody. And yeah, so after I ran that stuff by him and I started presenting all the stuff that I created with him, like the models and frameworks and every business initiative I came up with, I started presenting it to all the other lifting coaches. So I presented to the 3 or 4 other lifting guys we have. And then from there, I presented to some of the athletic trainers, and I've been guest lecturing at the university. I guest lectured at the university twice so far for some senior level business management courses on kind of self-brand. It's pretty much was based around self-branding and how to take network initiative and communicate with people the way you want to convey yourself, and living by principle and understanding the who, what, where, why, when, and hows of your life, like simple stuff like that. A little bit of a motivational summit.
Let me ask you this question. If you could kind of sum up this mentored program, the advice you would give, as we're getting close to wrapping up here, if you could, what advice would you give to, let's say, a college student or a high school student going on to college, or even going on to, some other career? What would be kind of the main nugget you'd want to leave with them?
Heaven is here on earth. Live in your own heaven. So I live by that every single day. We don't know what's like. Life is finite. All right. Everyone's got an expiration date. And sometimes people die young, which is scary. And I got a couple close friends who did pass away young, and that wasn't a fun experience. So understand that we don't know what goes on after this, after our physical existence. But if we could come up with some kind of philosophy on it, it is right in front of us. Our heaven is these conversations right here. Our heaven is kissing my mom on the forehead and telling her I love your mom. My heaven is being able to hug my dad and have him celebrate every milestone in my life. My heaven is being able to live with a brother and harness him and embrace him as much as possible and tell him I love him anytime I can, because these are the people that leave the impact on me. And what I mean by live in your own heaven is there's going to be a ton of opinions that are going to try to sway the decisions you make in your life. But the opinion that matters the most is the opinion of the golden horn. The golden horn is this mythological tale. It's like a folklore, but the golden horn is like the voice inside of your head. It can be internal or external, but everyone knows the answer to their own life's situations. Okay. There's always, it's a pretty binary scheme. It's like there's a yes or a no, or a right or a wrong. It's all about the initiatives we want to take. But living in your own heaven is understanding what your end goal is in mind and pursuing every outlet that's going to achieve that end goal. So me primarily, I wake up every single day and I know what my end goal is going to be at that end of the day, because I have intention. I live with intention.
Sure.
I dominate with purpose every single day I wake up, because I'm living in my own heaven and I'm purely embracing the heaven that I'm living in.
Yeah, yeah, very, very, very well said. How can our listeners get a hold of you, Sean? What, and I'll put this near the top of the, on this interview too. What is the best way for them to get a hold of you? And this has been fantastic.
All right, thank you. Yeah, so I'm off the grid with social media.
Right.
If you would like to get a hold of me, please reach out to me over email. My email is SEAN. This is all lower cases. So SEAN period dot mentored MENTORD at gmail.com. If you after that, if after you reach out and you would like to pursue another conversation, we could have a little bit of an email exchange, and I'll give you my phone number and we'll figure out next steps from there. Currently I have my my LLC fully established, and I am a fully functioning business right now. So if you're more than interested in working with me or figuring out a next step where you would like to hear my opinion on something, we could always discuss some avenues from there after you reach out.
Well, this has been great, Sean. Super appreciate it. Can you hang for a minute or two when we get finished here?
Of course.
Okay, great, great. Thank you so much.